All right, so you've probably seen it, you probably like it. The question is, how does it compare to the competition? In short, decent spec bump, no big game-changing innovation, but it does look good. Well, right off the bat, one of the major distinguishing features of the S8 and S8 Plus is the fact that it's using Snapdragon 835 system on a chip. The Galaxy S8 will be the first product to market the new system on a chip, followed by Sony's Xperia XZ Premium, which has also been announced to use the new chip. Other recently announced handsets from LG and HTC are using last year's Snapdragon 821, which is a fine chip, we should add, while Huawei is making the most of its latest high-silicon Kirin 960. Now we should note that Samsung will also be launching some of its S8 models with its own in-house Exynos 8895 processor, which is expected to closely match the performance of the Snapdragon. The point of note here is that with these new chips, they will move down to a 10 nanometer manufacturing process, which means it will improve your energy efficiency and performance, along with some notable boosts in graphic performance. Samsung states that the Galaxy S8 offers up to a typical 10% improvement to CPU performance and a more impressive 21% gain in GPU performance since its last handset. Now, what about the displays and what Samsung is calling the QHD+? Well, the new handset's 2960 by 1440 display resolution is what Samsung is calling QHD+. QHD 2560 by 1440 resolution is already more than sufficient for display sizes between a 5.5 and 6.5 inch displays. So we aren't anticipating a noticeable boost in image clarity with the new display resolution. After all, Sony's 4K display is rather wasted in its limited form factor. Samsung has moved over to an 18:9 aspect ratio, similar to LG G6, which now features an 18:9 aspect ratio. This change is here to support future media content that will move over to its 2.1 aspect ratio in the future. The slightly longer display also lends itself a little more nicely to stacking multi-windows on top of one another. Now let's talk about RAM, because for most geeks, they love RAM like a goat loves revenge. Hey! But it looks like that Uncle Sammy is cooling their RAM jets. Quickly looking at the memory options inside today's flagships, 4 GB of RAM and 64 GB of internal flash memory is the norm. Samsung hasn't seen the need to increase the RAM capacity from last year's Galaxy S7, which is probably the right call when it comes to weighing up the costs versus performance benefits. But don't worry too much about a spec bump ceiling, because Samsung did put some extra work in their camera, and it didn't come down to just megapixels. When it comes to the camera, we see a similar reserved improvement by Samsung over last year's model. There's the same 12 megapixel dual diode autofocus spec sheet from the rear sensor of last year. Instead, it's the front-facing camera that has been upgraded to an 8 megapixel sensor with the same f1.7 aperture. Instead of a major hardware overhaul, Samsung says that it has implemented a new multi-frame image processing technique, which takes 3 images and combines data from 2 of them to improve the look of the final result. We'll have to wait until we can go properly hands-on with the phone's camera. Now let's talk extras. We see most of the commonly used features appearing across the board. NFC, fingerprint scanners, a USB Type-C port, and fast charging technology are now common across the entire flagship tier. Support for 24-bit and even 32-bit audio files are now also universal, although listening experiences will vary depending on the phone's circuit layout and other components. Only the HTC U Ultra has been brazen enough to ditch the 3.5mm headphone jack. And unfortunately, US customers won't have access to Xperia XZ's premium fingerprint scanner either, so you want to take that into account. That said, HTC's boom sound speaker technology remains one of the best, and we'll have to have a listen before drawing any conclusions. Meanwhile, LG traded in the Quad DAC for wireless charging on the American G6. So like I said at the top, decent spec bump, but nothing super innovative. But the thing looks dang good. And I want to note that when we've actually got our hands on it, we notice that although it's longer and bigger by dimensions, it doesn't feel as big. And I thought that would be a big deal for those of you who are worried about the devices being too large. When you get your hands on it, tweet me right there. I want to know what you think about it, either in the comments or on Twitter. Let me know. I want to hear your voice.